She thumps a cane and drinks champagne. She's formidable and judgmental, but we can guarantee that she's a quintessential lady D, but recognizes great potential. What would Danbury do?
Welcome to What Would Danbury Do, your guide to Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series from A to V. It's the morning after the night before, as all of our characters deal with the consequences of their actions, some public and some very private. Further, Daphne and Simon return to London to help mitigate the repercussions for Colin, which means all of our characters are in one place again and everyone is very tense. Let's discuss. This episode of What Would Danbury Do is brought to you by Vanessa Riley's new novel, An Earl, the Girl, and a Toddler. It's a sweeping, soapy, and utterly romantic read, perfect if you're looking for historical romance with powerful characters of color, multicultural communities, and an emphasis on romance and relationship. Rudy read Vanessa Riley's Advertisements for Love series and is excited to check out Vanessa's newest rollicking adventure. An Earl, the Girl, and a Toddler follows Jemima and Daniel as they battle through shipwrecks, amnesia, dangerous secrets, and scandalous reputations on the way to true love. If you're interested in An Earl, the Girl, and a Toddler, you can buy this and Vanessa's first title, A Duke, a Lady, and a Baby, wherever you get your books, or visit Vanessa online at vanessariley.com.
My voice is incredibly husky this week, and I don't really know why, because I'm certainly not sick. I don't know if you guys can tell, but I can hear it.
I mean, a little bit, but I would lean into it.
Yeah, I haven't been taking vocal training. This is just, I've accidentally fucked up my voice in a way that sounds nice but hurts.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Rudy.
It's fine.
So, the Featheringtons are in disgrace over their role in Marina's deceit and attempt to trap Colin. Daphne decides to return to London to support her brother, and Simon agrees to accompany her to hold up appearances. Although their relationship is one of simmering tension, they nonetheless continue to act on their attraction. Daphne attempts to convince Simon that children would be a blessing while she waits to discover if she is pregnant. Marina attempts to force a miscarriage. Daphne's period arrives, and this episode features an ultimatum, a dishonorable deal, understanding, and one hell of a ladies' night. This episode comes with content warnings for attempted abortions, fertility issues, and potential pregnancy losses. So this episode kicks off with a textbook example of passive aggression, and I'm Canadian, so I know me some passive aggression, and I was very impressed with the whole display that they had going on here.
I Shazammed the song that Daphne is playing, and it is a piece by Beethoven. I quite liked that this was the piece that she's getting her aggression out with, because A Room with a View, Lucy plays Beethoven quite a lot because she's so full of like emotions and passion, and like she keeps trying to kind of repress everything, but when it comes to her playing piano, that's where like all of that kind of spills out and she can't hide it anymore.
This is the morning after, right? It has to be if Daphne's things are still in Simon's bedchamber.
I think so.
I'm incredibly confused by the scenes we see at Cliveden. So I could never kind of figure out what was going on. And then I'm like, am I not identifying the subtext? Or like, it just seems like a big old mess.
Well, I mean, I think there's two things of note in this scene in particular. The first is that Simon doesn't want her moving out. And the second is that Daphne has discovered her tongue.
There's something in this idea that now that Daphne is sexually experienced, she has come into herself as a more confident and more kind of whole woman.
Yeah, it's just the tiniest little bit biblical.
I realize that this is the society and like in a lot of very real ways that would have been the case. Like there are things that she now knows that she would not have been privy to or invited into before getting married, and so like it all kind of goes together, but it's a trope that I'm just like, ew, let's not do this.
But I wonder also if it has more to do with having reality come into her fairy tale life. Like sort of up until this point, she's led an incredibly charmed life. I mean, it's not saying that she didn't have her challenges. She has, even just in this show, in terms of being a diamond of the first water, but then not being a diamond anymore, and then having to deal with the odious advances of Nigel Burbrook and his machinations. Like, she's certainly had her challenges, but all of a sudden she's actually facing a challenge in her life that she can't overcome with, like, being perky and popular and having lots of money. And I think that there's a certain level of maturity that comes to that when an immovable object hits an unstoppable force, and recognizing that sometimes things just don't work out.
Someone else who is having some realizations that sometimes life doesn't work out is Marina, who is in social freefall, massive disgrace. Things are not going well in the Featherington home.
I kind of like the commitment that Marina is someone who doesn't feel too sorry for herself and refuses for people to treat her like shit.
Daphne and Simon arrive back in London, and Daphne goes straight to Bridgerton House, but doesn't let Simon come in with her.
She basically says he's no longer part of the family in the dining room.
So Daphne sends Simon off in the carriage. Then she goes into Bridgerton House, where, like, Daphne is spoiling for a fight this whole episode. Mm-hmm. Remember how we talked about Anthony and Simon both wearing their feelings on the outside and, like, letting them splash all over everybody around her? That's Daphne in this episode. Like, everything that she ever would have swallowed back comes right out of her mouth, and she is sharp.
I mean, the difference with Daphne is that she is intentional in where those feelings are being splashed. She's aiming for specific people, and those are the people that get hit.
Yeah.
She sharpens her tongue on Anthony, and then she sharpens her tongue on her mother. Then she has this lovely little conversation with Colin. Like, Anthony and Violet really, I think, are in their way trying to be there for Colin, but they're both so worried about the reputation of the family and everything. Not because neither of them took his feelings seriously either. They continue to not take his feelings seriously. They're just dealing with the consequences. Daphne is sort of the first one who says, "Hey, how are you doing? Are you okay?"
So earlier in the season, we had a lot of Daphne-Simon relationship beats were paralleling with Anthony and Sienna. So there was a lot of, like, oh, we're together, but we're not really together. And sometimes the person you love doesn't love you back kind of shit going on. Now we're getting a Colin Marina parallel with Simon and Daphne. And so they've done that switcheroo, which is fine, except we have not had enough time to see this kind of happen. In some ways, it's like, cool, they're trusting their audience. But in other ways, it's like, developing doesn't mean you don't trust.
I do think that there was a nice parallel here, speaking of parallel structures, so Daphne goes to Bridgerton House, where she sees her family and, like, picks fights with them. And we see Simon going to his family, or rather his found family in Will, and, like, picks an actual fight with him.
Daphne's lashing out with words, and then Simon's just lashing out with his fists or his tongue.
Well, I mean, thanks for segueing so neatly into our next scene, where we get, is this our second vertical oral sex?
Yeah. They are kind of lying on the stairs.
Was this him being strategic and fucking her as a fuck you for the other night?
I really think it's just it's meant to be he can't help himself.
I'm not entirely sure if he actually intended to only have oral sex. Like, there was a part of me that went, he fully intended for this to go further and then couldn't. Like, physically and emotionally could not do it.
Interesting. I support the reading of it. Actually, it's really interesting because then he says, this can never happen again. And it's like, you think that he's saying this can never happen again because, you know, they're all so angry at each other, but maybe this can never happen again because he's had loving and joyful sex. He can't have any other kind of sex. Like, literally cannot have any other sex.
The fight kind of starts because she sort of makes this accusation that he has been out with another woman. He's so incensed by the idea that she would think him capable of cheating. And then she's like, but your reputation. Except his feelings are engaged here. How could he possibly?
I wrote in my notes here, I said, the thing is, Daphne never just asks Simon about it, which turns out that she does later on in the episode. But that was one of the things in this particular scene. And actually, like, a lot of everything that's happened in this episode so far that just irritated the pants off me is that once she realizes that he is doing it on purpose, she gets so all up in her feelings that it never occurs to her to be like, why is he doing it on purpose? She just sort of jumps right to the conclusion that he's doing it to, you know, hurt her or whatever.
I think realistically, this is the point in the series where I deeply miss having an internal monologue for any of the characters, like, or a omniscient third person narrator. Like, I just want some kind of insight because I probably should have marked the page in the books, but in the books, both of them spend this time thinking about the scene and reflecting on how each of them individually feel about it and what exactly happened. In each point of view, there are very explicit thoughts where Daphne considers whether what she did was wrong or not. And Simon also considers whether what Daphne did was wrong or not. Because they refuse to communicate in this show, we don't get any of that exploration, and that I am missing.
Yeah.
We're not getting any evidence that either of them think they're wrong.
All right, so in our next scene, Daphne has gone ahead and set up a meeting between Colin and Marina. And this, I think, is where we start to really see those lovely parallels between Marina and Colin's relationship and Simon and Daphne's relationship. So we've moved from Anthony and Sienna to Colin and Marina. And I know we talked about how we wish there'd been more build-up, and I think this would have been a lot more poignant and a little bit less on the nose if we had sort of had a little bit more of the closeness that Colin and Daphne enjoy in the books through the series instead of just sort of being thrown into it now. But at the same time, I really do appreciate how the show does set up these little parallels throughout and sort of does this kind of circular storytelling to sort of suggest that none of these characters are actually ever truly misunderstood because there's always somebody who's been through something a little bit similar.
I agree, but it really points out Colin is completely underbaked compared to the other three.
I also feel like maybe Marina, I mean, I know, Adele in particular, that you love how, like, strong she's being, but I also feel like maybe a tiny little apology at this point would have not gone astray.
I do also have to identify as a sister. If anyone did this to my sibling, I would be fucking furious and you would have to watch out for me.
Why do you think Daphne does it? What can she possibly fix in this situation?
She sees herself in Marina. She is seeing a woman who trapped a man into marriage. Daphne herself feels like a woman who trapped a man into marriage over a child. She's just had this like massive fallout with her husband over the possibility of a child. If she can fix them, she can fix her own life. Like...
Yeah. But the thing about that really is, I don't like the idea of Marina being put into this storyline to be about Daphne. You know, that icks me out a bit.
One thing about that, like, about Marina coming in and having that attitude of, I didn't come here to be shamed by you. Because Colin's parting shot is about how if she had just told him, because he loved her so much, like, he'd have married her anyway. And I just looked at that and I said, you fucking liar. Like, I don't believe him. And I kind of hate that I'm supposed to.
Do you think that we're supposed to?
Yes.
I absolutely don't believe that Colin would have done that, but I believe that Colin believes that he would have done that. And actually, there's something that I'm finding entertaining about watching Colin be so deep in his feelings, painting himself as this romantic Byronic hero that's been done wrong in love. And because in the books, Colin is a storyteller, right? He's a writer. I feel like we're actually watching him write himself a backstory right now. Now he has this tragedy in his past that distinguishes him outside of, like, just being one of the Bridgerton brothers. I think that the actor actually did something quite subtle through here that he's not getting a lot of credit for, in terms of just having that slight edge of Colin really almost reveling in his heartbreak and in his sort of position as
guy in your MFA class.
He's going to come back with, like, a goatee.
He's going to come back with a personality, hopefully.
A personality or facial hair, one or the other.
Let's go to the Queen's Luncheon.
Queen's Luncheon, where Violet, what is this, Francesca watched episode 7, where Violet says, isn't it lovely for all of us to be together? Except Francesca's there. I had to pick that up.
The disrespect.
Poor Francesca. Even her own mother doesn't realize when she's not there.
Don't worry, Francesca. We remember you.
Rudy, it's really going to be hard to talk about what we're not allowed to talk about in the context of this scene.
Too bad.
All right. Can we talk about Benedict, though, for a second?
We sure can.
We absolutely can talk about Benedict.
He's in total bisexual panic.
Right? So Henry, of course, says to Benedict, you know, you should come and hang out again sometime. And, like, Benedict giggles. And then, so I might be reaching because I'm just such a Benedict Henry stan that I am willing to find all of the things. But I thought the way that he said that suggested that perhaps they had hung out a few more times between the last time that we saw them and now. Sorry to burst bubbles. I don't know. Listen, your headcanon can be different to my headcanon. It's fine. We have different heads. There's more than one brain involved in this podcast. I just think it's one of those moments where, like, Benedict knows that they know that he knows, and that's, like, why he's a little bit sort of extra giddy, because it also means that, like, they're still willing to talk to him and invite him places. I can see it. I desperately want it to be my way, but I can also see how it could possibly be your way as well. I also thought the way that Henry sort of delivered his little speech here about, you know, being respectable and living outside the edges was really well done. I feel like the actor who's playing Henry, he gives good face. Like, he can say a lot without saying very much at all. And the way that he delivers this, you know, his story, the way he tells his story is quite matter of fact. It's very subdued. And I think it's lovely, particularly in this episode where everybody is over emoting, and for Henry to be the one person besides Marina who has real problems, to be quite, you know, to just be quite deliberate and calm about it. All right, so after we have our scene with Henry, then the audacious Featheringtons show up. you just have to admire Portia and her rather transparent and desperate and yet oddly admirable attempts to just throw Marina under the bus and pretend like she didn't know and that she and Violet had been equally duped and that Marina was completely to blame and that Portia's attempts to marry Marina and Colin off very quickly was mere coincidence.
Except it doesn't work and Violet gives her the really cut direct.
That cut direct.
That does feel like something you need to whisper. You see Cressida and her mother reveling in someone else getting like smacked down. Daphne decides to use that very sharp tongue of hers to put them in their place, and Simon's turned on.
But if Rudy was correct, completely incapable of doing anything about it.
The Featheringtons leave in disgrace. Oh wait, we forgot the Eloise and Penn scene as well.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Actually, one thing that we did skip over that is like somewhat important is that Lady Danbury arrives and she invites Daphne to a soiree. Simon's not invited. And she's very pointed about that. And I was like, oh, something's going to happen.
Like, I think Lady Danbury would have invited her to the party anyway, as a married woman of the ton. But if they had been happier, I wonder if she would have delayed her invitation to the next party, because I really feel like Lady Danbury is pretty smart and pretty perceptive. And I don't think that Lady Danbury's marriage was particularly happy either. And I honestly feel like she is setting Daphne up here to say, marriages aren't always happy, but you know what? There are positives to it. And if it comes down to it, I'm on your side, not his. And I'm going to take you under my wing and we can be married ladies of the ton together.
I am going to have to sit with the idea and how I feel about this. This idea that Lady Danbury would choose Daphne's side in all of this.
I don't think she would. She's all Simon's got.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. But at the same time, if he's going to go the way of his father, like she's tried through the whole season to like get him to get his head out of his ass and realize what's in front of him and take the opportunities that are open to him and marry the girl that he's clearly in love with and start a happy life and leave behind all the stuff in his past. But I think that if he's not going to make those choices, if he's going to continue to self-destruct and become his father, I absolutely think Lady Danbury would step between him and Daphne and protect Daphne.
I don't know if I agree that he's in danger of becoming his dad. I think he's in danger of becoming a hermit.
I mean, she knows more than anybody else alive what the Dukes of Hastings can do to their wives, right?
Yeah.
I guess I just think like she is his metaphorical mother. It doesn't sit particularly comfortably with me that he would be abandoned over missteps. I
don't think that she's abandoning him, but I think that she's also very clearly saying,
get your head out of your ass. But I just like that Rudy and I are against you for once.
Enjoy it while it lasts. I look forward to being against both of you soon. I don't know. It comes quite a lot.
What are you talking about?
No, that's what I mean. That happens all the time. I'm always out on my own, making my own arguments, making up my own stories. Just call me Colin Bridgerton.
Lying on your bed, like writing an inner monologue to yourself. And he is that guy, like, who would lip sync into the mirror all by myself. Like,
what's wrong with that, Adele? That's a sign of a really cool person, I think. Oh my goodness.
All right, so Daphne picks the perfect time to have herself a little meltdown.
Yes. Ready? This is also something that I did not know on my own and I had to look up, but sharing this knowledge for other people. Daphne has her little meltdown and like fight with Violet while standing in front of a statue of the goddess Athena, who is the goddess of wisdom.
That is really interesting, particularly when considering what we were talking about earlier about Daphne knowing things now.
I need Violet to be better in the conversation she has with the next daughter after this conversation, because she's been told. So if she makes the decision to not talk about the expectations of what's coming up, having been told by Daphne this was not acceptable parenting, I'm going to be fucking furious.
Well, I think the problem is that Daphne is still not really saying what she needs her to say. Like, Violet is still like, I'm not entirely sure what's going on. And Daphne is jumping around the subject and speaking about like her very specific situation, which is not really universal.
I think this is why I often get so annoyed with discussions around historical accuracy, because like there are things that we are willing to accept, and then there are things that we're like, no, this is the way it has to be. And it's like, it's all just fucking tropes, man. Like, you can change so much of it. Just write me a good enough explanation for why this anachronism will be part of your story, and I will eat it up. For instance, because this has been bugging me for a little while, and Adele, it is you who put this in my brain in the first place.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So in our bonus episode about virginity, you pointed out Marina has a virginity loss story that mostly is happening off screen, but like when we meet her and we learn about it, it is effectively the same as Daphne's, in that she lost her virginity to somebody that she loved. Mm-hmm. And the only difference between Daphne and Marina was that Marina wasn't married yet. Like, in a lot of ways, I reject the idea that that she's the parable of like what happens when you do it the wrong way. Like, it fucking irritates me for the sheer fact that, like, if we're putting contemporary values into our stories, like, the right way is to wait until you are in love. Marina did that. And Daphne did that. And why are they being treated in a narrative sense like they've done something? One of them has done the right thing and one of them has done the wrong thing. And I know that's also kind of complicated by the fact that right now one of them has actually done a wronger thing in like pushing past somebody's consent.
Well, it's an issue of consent in both ways, isn't it? Daphne's issue was reproductive consent, but Marina was also trying to put Colin in a situation where he wasn't able to give informed consent as well.
I mean, like, yes, there's these sort of things where they're playing with like acceptable lines and acceptable behaviors, and people who don't give you the full truth and the repercussions of being somebody who's a liar and who does things the quote wrong way. Like, it just, I'm like too worked up to have any articulate thoughts, but I thought I'd put it on the table for you guys, and you can do what you want with my messy, messy feelings. Discuss.
I mean, I think that there's a really obvious difference between Daphne and Marina that plays into this concept of the color conscious casting that the showrunner was supposed to have done, and then just pretended that all other aspects of race didn't matter anymore.
I definitely think, whether it was intentional or otherwise, there's certainly a racial element to these two stories, and it is deeply uncomfortable
There's definitely the race aspect of it, but there's also, you talked about contemporary views. There are contemporary liberal views and there are contemporary conservative views that are still in line with the viewpoints of the old. So that you have to be married to have sex, that abortion is the worst possible thing you can do. And I think a lot of my fear around the Marina character is it doesn't feel safe what they're doing. One, to a black actress in that role, and two, what they are, all the things they are plugging into that do set some people off.
I forgot entirely that conservative views are a thing.
Yeah, no, well, we have a lovely little progressive bubble.
I wonder if it's not necessarily about Daphne and Marina themselves, but more about the choices that Daphne and Marina made in terms of choosing the right partner. So Daphne chooses Simon, and I mean, for all extents and purposes, in a way that is not that dissimilar from Marina choosing to have sex with George. But in Daphne's case, they didn't go all the way, but there was definitely a sex scandal on the horizon if they hadn't gotten married. I think the difference is that Simon stayed, whereas George actually had sex with Marina, but he didn't stay. I mean, there could be a reading to this that it's not the sex that sets them apart, but rather the choice of who they have sex with.
I guess I would walk it back a little bit further and say it's not about who they chose to have sex with so much as who they chose to love. Because, I do still think that there is something to be problematized about the idea of, having sex before or after marriage, purely because of how many historical romance novels I read and the fact that very often those couples preempt their vows and they will have sex before marriage. And we are not supposed to judge them harshly for that, which, that would put Marina firmly in that space.
If we look at the way that the peerage worked, Sir George was an oldest son. He shouldn't have been the soldier. To a certain extent, we could probably surmise that it was a choice on his part. And he chooses to go to Spain rather than stay, take over the estate, marry Marina.
I think what I'm realizing is that there is a way of reading George as
a villain.
As a Wickham.
I don't know if I believe he is a villain.
I don't want to believe he's a villain, but Kate's stuff made too much sense. And then, the other option is that, the showrunners are not as competent. And
they haven't had to do as many close readings as I have in my life, perhaps.
Okay, is there anything else that we want to say? Because all of this was sparked by the fact that the scene that we were supposed to be discussing is that Daphne visits Marina at home. Is there anything else about that, interaction and her offer to find George, the bastard?
I love all of the scenes where Marina proves herself so much more worldly and wise than just the entire Bridgerton family all at once. Because Daphne's like, I'll write a letter. And Marina's like, oh, honey.
You know how last week we discussed whether Marina was acting when she was encouraging Colin to elope. The energy that she gives in these scenes where she's like, all artifice is stripped away, is very much the same energy from that scene, which is why I continue to believe that she was truthful. And this is just basically all I want to say is I continue to believe in her wholeheartedly. I don't know if they were tweets or TikToks, but there was some stuff about like, this show is really trying to sell us on the idea of cuckolding. And I was like, yeah, and I bought that idea. Anyway.
All right, speaking of daddies, let's go talk to Will for a while. Okay, there's two things I really love. The first is that we get to see Will outside of his Simon context here. So for a second, he's an actual character in the show as opposed to just sort of Simon's punching bag / conscience. But I really, really love the tension that is set up here by Lord Featherington's offer. So Lord Featherington comes to him and is like, look, hard truth time, baby. Nobody wants to partner with you as a business partner because you're not at a high enough social level for us to do that. But here's a way that we can both make a lot of money. And Will is all like, I'm too honorable to throw my fight, but what is actually more honorable? The sort of intangible honor of giving everything that he has in the ring, or being able to take care of his family.
Particularly because I got this sense that it's not just about his class. There is a hint that Will has come from a family that was like under colonial oppression, which again, like it's yet another kind of sign that the way that race works in the Bridgerton universe is like, well, is incredibly messy. Can those upper class people even call themselves honourable when they are engaging in colonial violence, whether they're doing it kind of right in front of you or not?
I mean, I think that you're right. I think there's definitely more than a hint that Will is the child of a slave, either on both his parents' sides or one or the other. But what I think it does on that level as well is throw a lot of questions towards, in this universe where love elevated Black people, who got to be elevated and why, and
where,
who did not, and where.
In a much less serious sense, can I just say that if anyone else like me was watching this series and going, where do I know Lord Featherington from? Death in Paradise. He is the detective in the beginning of that series.
Right. I just want to say that I am married, damn it. And I have not yet received an invitation to any of Lady Danbury's married women parties, and I'm actively angry.
I was really enjoying the fact that this scandalous lady party was happening while Simon was at what I called probably White's, because I don't know which club he belongs to.
Club, yeah. When you said that, I thought some people might not know that's a club.
So, and like, it's so staid and boring at the men's club that Simon and Anthony are at. Like, and then it would just keep doing these cuts between like the women are drinking and smoking and gambling, and like no one's wearing gloves except Daphne because she hasn't quite learnt to be scandalous yet. And then it would go to the men's club where they're just sitting there, and Anthony's sitting back and talking about the bubbles in his beer. Which obviously does eventually lead to a punch-on, and that's great, but like...
Well, I mean, it stayed until the two of them can't control themselves anymore. I really like how he came in to go to bat for Daphne, actually. Yeah. It sort of underlines that he is supposed to be a good older brother, even if he regularly fucks it up really badly.
Terrible dismount, yeah.
I just want to go back to the party for a second, because I've written down something in my notes here that I feel further cements my position as Lady Danbury being on Daphne's side in this.
Mm.
She makes some pointed comments directly to Daphne, but also about Daphne as she's teaching Daphne how to play the whatever gambling game that they're playing, about practice and perseverance, how you can figure out the good things about a marriage. And the implication, I think, there is even if the marriage isn't good. Like, I don't think that her putting Daphne at the table with the one woman who is very happily widowed and the other woman who is very happy to live a separate life from her husband is an unthinking one. Mm. Meanwhile, Simon is looking for a fight, and it's a thing that he fights with Will, a professional boxer, who regularly hits him, but has never yet made him bleed, but Anthony manages to pull it off.
I mean, they do also crash into a table, so it might not have actually had anything to do with Anthony. I think Simon lost a fight to a table.
That's even worse.
I mean, it continues to be, and again, I don't like it. I don't like that when he gets angry, when he has negative emotions, he responds with, like, physicality, because I think that it's still a lazy and problematic way of trying to nudge viewers into this idea that, like, Simon absolutely had enough control over the scene to be able to have, like, stopped it if he wanted, therefore he consented in some way. Like, but I think that in a lot of ways this fight and the one that he has, like the sparring match that he has with Will earlier, is a continuation of that characterization. That said, tending wounds. I'm so trash for this. I don't care. I don't care. It doesn't matter who in the couple is, like, hurt and who is, like, who's tending wounds. Like, it does. If someone is sick and someone is the healer, I just love it. Especially when they're feeling all these feelings and they can't talk to each other, but they've got to be close to each other.
I've been watching Shadow and Bone on Netflix, and there's a couple that does this, and I was like 110% in.
It's especially, like, the cliche of, like, it doesn't actually hurt until she, like, dabs it a little bit with the cloth, and then it's like, and just that, like,
oh my god. I also have to mention this happened on my a show I really loved until it went bad, but Arrow with Oliver and Felicity, he did that. Like, the worst shit could happen to him. He could be, like, black and blue, but he got a graze, I think, on his face, and straight away he did that, and it was such an overreaction. Oh, I love it.
It just makes me happy.
I'm so embarrassed right now because I'm like
Oh.
she sits on his lap.
Me, I know.
And then they have a little kiss.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, you do.
A, the thing which I just adore, and then B, the kissing, and then C, she finally fucking asks him the fucking question that she should have asked him from the get-go, which is, why?
The way that she is, like, for every single thing that he says, she's ready to go. He's like, I made a vow. She's like, what about the vow you made to me?
Did you make a sound when she did that? Because I went, ooh, like, I did not see that coming.
I don't know. I was so caught up in it all. So, like, this next one, I was... when he was like, it was on his deathbed, in my head, I was like, something, marriage bed. And then it happened. And I was like, fucking, I could write this show. I don't know if that means that they're hacks or I. like, or I'm a genius, but like, I could write this show.
I just love that scene for Daphne. I think she was fire.
We get this again the morning after the night before. And look, I don't understand all of these women checking their bedclothes all the time. Like, I just feel like are they incapable of feeling it? Like their periods?
Simon suddenly just puts his head in the door at the right time to realize her period hasn't come.
Is she showing him that her sheets are clean?
And then we go into like a pile of bitsy scenes again. So we see Marina and Daphne again, and Marina being all like, oh, honey, with Daphne's efforts. Like, the general's not going to write back to you if you didn't have the power of the Duke behind you, and sort of revealing the limitations of Daphne's new freedom to Daphne in a way that Daphne didn't recognize. And Violet's learning a little bit as well with Eloise when she's like, well, you don't actually have to come out until you're ready. Like,
and then everyone goes to the theatre.
And we get to see Henry again, which is nice for me.
Eloise and the Queen finally catch up to talk about how her investigation's going, and the Queen is completely unimpressed.
And we find out that she's hired some Bow Street runners, so that was the Regency equivalent of the police force.
At this point, I like to play a game called Remember that Eloise is 15 years old. It is incredibly fun to watch this like little chunk of the episode and be like, the Queen is talking to a 15-year-old child. And then, because Eloise is kind of upset about the fact that she's effectively been fired, she and Benedict leave and they go, like, on their way home, they pick up the modiste, who I only just now realised her shop is called Modiste, which made me laugh.
We need to talk about this part.
I just want to put it again in everyone's head that the conversation that happens between Genevieve and Eloise, you have to remember that Eloise is 15. She's just the 15-year-old sister of the guy that she's sleeping with.
I know. And like, Benedict, what the fuck?
But like the conversation that happens between the two of them, I believe that Genevieve is talking to a 15-year-old. Like the way that she talks to her and she's like, oh, did you have fun at the theatre? And it's just trying to ask these like, it's this
very
awkward conversation.
Yeah.
Like it's very, grown up talking to child.
Eloise and Benedict scampering away from the theatre was such a joyous little moment. I was like, oh, this is making me so happy. And we have this scene where Eloise puts together who she thinks Lady Whistledown is.
Yeah, she comes to a conclusion.
I mean, I think that she, at the very least, narrows it down significantly to a much smaller group of people to choose from. All right, so in the next scene, we see Marina trying to, essentially she's trying to abort her baby. She's trying to lose her baby. I looked it up, and so one of the only herbs that we can see the label for that she chooses is juniper berries, which in fact can cause miscarriage. If you are pregnant or breastfeeding, you're not supposed to have juniper berries because they can be really bad for the baby. So I thought she was just picking herbs at random, but it looks like she'd at least done a little bit of research.
At the same time, we see Simon and Daphne at the theatre looking completely cold to each other, and a realization sweeping over Daphne's face, to which she then leaves their box, and it is revealed that she's had her period.
Yeah, two things. One, Simon reaches for her. Like, they're holding hands by the time it ends. But also Anthony sees Sienna.
Yeah, true.
So there's that startup again of what's going to happen there. So a few more questions are raised sort of at the end of the episode, because there's no reason for Simon to reach for Daphne then except that he wants to. You know, there's nothing, there can't be anything sexual about it. It's really just a connection touch. But then, Adele, as you said, Daphne sort of jolts upright and flees the room. Full credit to the show to being like, we're talking about period blood, we're going to show us some period blood.
Yeah, I was so shocked. I actually wrote that down in capital letters, because that does not happen.
And that is like a fucking lot of blood, though. And it's just sort of like sloshing around on there.
Yeah, there's no clots or anything.
Yeah, well, it's
like
really,
yeah,
it's really loose. Like it's
sanitized blood.
she's shoving rags up obviously into her undergarments, but her dress is really pale and her hands are clean. Look, with the amount of blood there, I wonder if we're supposed to read it as a miscarriage.
Yeah.
The only reason that I would push back on that is that she explicitly says she is expecting to get her period in the next couple of days. And this very much seems like only a couple of days has gone by.
It is a lot of blood, and the blood itself is really
liquid.
It's really watery, yeah. So, I mean, full kudos for showing period blood being red and whatever, but also, like, you need to work on the consistency for realism value. And then, because the show does manage to end its episodes in ways that I think are really well done, we have this ending on Simon's face. And even though it is practically impossible to actually have happened, we hear Daphne sobbing.
Oh my gosh, I just realized when you said that throughout the episode we have heard Daphne's pain through her words, and throughout the episode we have seen Simon's pain through his actions and his fighting as well.
Do you think that they are also kind of wanting you to go, this is him realizing maybe a part of him wanted a child?
I think it's him realizing as well. Like, I think on the one level, he wanted Daphne to be pregnant because it would mean that they would stay together and that he would have her beside him, even if she's angry at him, even if they never get the quiet intimacy.
The proximity.
The proximity means that there was hope. And so I think that the pain that we see is twofold. The one that they have agreed to live separate lives, so he's losing her, but also the realization that maybe he actually did want the chance of a family and a baby with her as well.
I feel like there is a tendency for TV in particular to do that, to be like, we're going to put this idea of a baby on, like, out there, and then when it doesn't happen, then you'll know that you actually did want it. And now it'll be totally fine when we turn around very soon and give you a baby. Which, make of that what you will.
Well, I mean, it's playing right into the romance novel narrative, right? The true manifestation of your love is if you create a new life together. And that no love story is complete without this physical manifestation of your love in the form of a baby, which is prevalent, historical, and part of the overarching genre narrative, and also problematic as fuck. But I mean, we've talked about this being a conventional love story. And it makes sense that Well, I mean, it makes sense in terms of how the book is situated within the romance novel traditions and how closely the series is actually tied to the books, but also like Daphne's motivations and Simon's inability to understand what he actually wants or whatever, that a baby should be on the cards. But I just want to like say right out that in fact you can love somebody without having children. You don't have to have children. Still counts. Still valid. 100% way of being.
Yeah, I we need to stop putting this out in the world that you need to have a child to be complete.
Can I give a shout out to what I'm going to call an unofficial bonus episode to this conversation? Novel Feelings. They did a really fantastic episode about attachment styles, and one of the things that they discussed was like Simon's whole kind of deal with not wanting to have children and then very quickly getting past that.
Like, as a society, we pathologize all the time and we don't actually have the training for it. So it's actually good to listen to people who are trained in those things.
So Kat Mayo has a theory that the last true taboo in romance novels, and I guess like the romance genre in general, is abortion.
I thought you were saying anal or something.
No. And Adele, you're onto something. So her reasoning is that anal used to be a taboo in romance, but it's not anymore. Like, it is, in fact, quite commonplace. Whereas it is very difficult to find any kind of narrative of a pregnant person making a choice to have an abortion, and there are issues about the fact that of all of the characters that could be doing this, it's Marina. But if the show writers are clever about this, there is some very cool potential in how they handle Marina going forward as a character who made a choice. Purely because, yeah, like it is super hard to find a character in romance who has attempted or actually like gone through with having an abortion and then like still being treated as not a villain.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, and I think that it further problematizes Marina's representation in the show. I remember writing an article about this a few years ago, and if you Google romances with abortions or romances where heroines have abortions, the first thing that pops up is romances with heroines who've had a miscarriage.
Wow.
Yeah. The only one that I can think of where a heroine has an abortion, doesn't regret it, and
isn't villainized,
isn't punished for it, is Destiny's Surrender.
Beverly Jenkins.
Beverly Jenkins. Yeah. It's been a little while since I read the book. If I remember correctly, she's given something to drink. It makes her super sick, so she doesn't want to take it again. So she has an abortion. It makes her the concoction makes her feel really sick. She doesn't want to take it again. When she gets pregnant a second time, she thinks about putting it up for adoption. Like, she just decides not to have an abortion the second time. But she 100% has an abortion the first time around and has absolutely no regrets about it. In this discussion, though, the one thing that I can't recommend highly enough is the movie Obvious Child with Jenny Slate, which is a romantic comedy about an abortion, and it's done really, really well and handles a lot of the issues just beautifully and is legitimately a romantic comedy.
One of my favorite abortion narratives, which sounds like a weird thing to say, is in Please Like Me, which is an Australian comedy by Josh Thomas. And so his friend asks him to go with her when she needs to go and get an abortion, and kind of the 2 episodes that are encompassed in that story are just... I love them so much. I love that series quite a lot, even though there is some solid critiques to be made about it. So sort of a weird note to end on.
All right, should we do?
What would Danbury do?
In this episode, we hear from another lovelorn book character looking for someone to tell it like it is and finding Lady Danbury, who will do just that. This episode's letter comes from Naledi from Alyssa Cole's A Princess in Theory.
Dear Lady Danbury, I have had a few run-ins with a very unusual guy. He came as a new hire to my work, but clearly didn't know the first thing about serving at a restaurant. I tried to help and cover for him, but he still was quite rude to the customers, like he was better than them or something, and he ended up setting the dessert table on fire. After I fired him, I then find out he's rented the apartment across from mine while my neighbor goes on vacation. Though he's apologized and promises me it's just a coincidence, I feel slightly stalked. The main problem, though, is he's really hot. Like, really. And I have this funny feeling like I know him from somewhere, though I swear I've never met him before this. He wants to get to know me better. What should I do? Thanks for your help, Naledi Smith. P.S. I keep getting these emails from a supposed African prince saying I'm his betrothed. Is this some new type of scam?
Are we in a thriller or a romance? Because that will give me a lead. Give him a go, have a fling, and keep a fire extinguisher nearby.
I understand the feeling slightly stalked thing, and also being
Yes.
like you're super hot, but also you're giving off some vibes, and I'm not sure about the vibes. Like, I get it. I would maybe, if you like, depending on how hot like a piece of
Flammable?
art that you can admire from afar, or hot like, wow, I really need to get my hands on that. Because if it's the latter, then I would like maybe try and explore it in very public places with lots of people around. And don't like let him walk you home.
He lives across the hall or whatever.
Yeah, but he could whatever. He's living across the hall. But like whatever, don't let him into your apartment.
This is your time to investigate. Like, I think you need to do a little bit more investigating. What kind of sounds are you hearing from his apartment? Like, are they scary sounds? Does he have good taste in music? Does he have good taste in TV shows? Also, when it comes to those clearly scam emails, that's what your junk folder's for, Naledi. I listen to Scam Goddess. I know about these things. I actually do love a scammer. Like, I've got a soft spot for a scammer, but like, that's also because I'm a classic Mark. Like,
Oh,
So this letter comes from Nancy, who sent us this book recommendation because A Princess in Theory, but also the remaining books in the series, which are all part of Alyssa Cole's Reluctant Royal series, are just a really delightful contemporary twist on that fairy tale royal romance. They're beautifully written, the characters are beautifully developed, and the dresses that the heroines wear on the covers are covetable in their own right.
if you too would like to send a thinly veiled book recommendation in the form of a letter, we'd love to hear from you. Just take a voice memo of your letter and email it to us at bridgertonpod@gmail.com.
That's all for this episode of What Would Danbury Do? We'll be back in a fortnight to discuss the final episode in Netflix's Bridgerton Season 1, After the Rain. If you haven't followed our new Instagram account, you can do so at WWDDpod. You can still find us on Twitter at BridgertonPod. Send us an email at bridgertonpod@gmail.com or join the conversation, #WWDDpod. You can also leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform. People who leave reviews have shinier hair. This episode was recorded on the traditional and unceded land of the Gadigal, Wurundjeri, and Boonwurrung people, and edited by audio producer Rudy Bremer on Gadigal country. Thanks for listening, and remember, WWDD. What Would Danbury Do is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts.